Well, the portion for this week is Shoftim, Judges. You can find it in Deuteronomy 16:18 through 21:9. John Borman's film, Excalibur. It's a moving interpretation of the King Arthur legend. Now, at the high point of that film, everything is well in the kingdom except for the perpetual absence of Sir Lancelot. And because of his attraction for Queen Guinevere, Lancelot has exiled himself from the court so as to avoid temptation. And everyone seems to understand this except for King Arthur himself. No one speaks of the matter until one day when Sir Gawain takes it on himself to address this blight on Camelot's perfection. And Gawain accuses the queen of driving Lancelot from the company of Arthur's knights. Stung at his assault on her honor, Guinevere turns to Arthur and says, "Will you not champion me?" He replies, "I cannot. I am your king, and I must be your judge in this. Lancelot must do it. He also stands accused. I decree that at sunrise 2 days from now the champions will meet, and the truth shall be known. For by the law of God, no knight who is false can win in combat with one who is true." Now, we might question the logic of this modern perception of medieval justice, but there is an important principle here that in King Arthur's declaration, which we find in this Torah portion, Shoftim. The principle comes at the very beginning. "Judges and officers you are to appoint within all your gates that Adonai your God is giving you, according to your tribes, and they are to judge the people with righteous judgment. You are not to twist justice. You must not show partiality or take a bribe, for a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and distorts the words of the righteous. Justice you must pursue, so that you may live and possess the land that Adonai your God is giving you." Now, it's right there in that last sentence. Justice you must pursue. Another way to say this is pursue justice the right way, with proper motives and methods. Now, think about it this way. Our Creator intends that we deal with infractions of His commandments, but if we do it the wrong way, we become guilty of further and perhaps worse infractions. We see this in our everyday lives. It may be a corrupt judge issuing an improper ruling, or a hasty and regrettable action by law enforcement in the heat of the moment, or even a conspiracy to default someone through the courts. But all such cases are misapplication of tools of justice, and all of them grieve the heart of our eternal judge. So how do we carry out just justice? Well, one way is by going through the due process of law as specified in the Torah. We are to investigate the matters thoroughly before rendering judgment, to confirm matters through multiple witnesses, and to render appropriate corrective measures when required. That's the meaning of Deuteronomy 19:21, which says, "Your eye must not show pity, life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot." When we read this in context, we see it's not a harsh, uncompromising injunction to deprive wrongdoers of life and limb, but a statement of legal principle. Each case is unique and is to be decided by well-qualified, honest judges who have weighed the facts carefully. Any sentence of punishment must fit the circumstances. It doesn't call for judges to have people's eyes put out, but rather for proper compensation to the victims. What's the value of an eye? Well, the accused will find out, not by having his own eye removed, but by paying compensation or by doing work for the one he has harmed. That is just justice. Now, pursuing justice the right way also means sharing power among the different parts of the justice system, something that our Western law codes have inherited from the Torah. In establishing His principles of government, God created the roles of priest, prophet, and king. The priests and the Levites serve as national judges, and elders of each community serve as local judges. The people of the community appoint judges from among the wise, righteous members of society. They rule on local matters, but on issues beyond their jurisdiction, they defer to the Levitical courts. And that's because the Levites are God's chosen judges. They have no inheritance in the land because God himself is their inheritance. And if God alone is their benefactor, and if the people support the priests and Levites with their tithes and offerings according to God's established order, then these judges are much less susceptible to corruption by bribes or any other influence that might distract them from righteous pursuit of justice. Now, the prophets are like God's investigators. They proclaim the word of the Lord, which might mean words of correction to those who are falling away from his righteous standards. And that's one thing Messiah is supposed to do. Deuteronomy 18:15 through 19 tells of the prophet like Moses, whom God will raise up one day. The apostles testify that Yeshua is that prophet like Moses, the one whom we should obey. Such is the proclamation of Christians, and so I believe. However, there are many prophecies about the Messiah, son of David, yet to be fulfilled. We can learn something here. Yeshua has come as the suffering Messiah, but he hasn't yet come as the Messiah who brings peace and order to the whole earth. Which brings us to the next point regarding God's divine government, kingship. Deuteronomy 17 specifies the requirements for Israel's kings. That they be native Israelites, that they not amass an offensive army, that they not multiply too much money to themselves or multiply wives, that they not look back to Egypt, and that they write a copy of the Torah for themselves so they can study it daily. The reason for these requirements is in Deuteronomy 17:20. Then his heart will not be exalted above his brothers, and he will not turn from the commandment to the right or to the left, so that he may prolong his days in the kingship, he and his sons in the midst of Israel. Now here's the irony of Israel's king. He's to be the highest authority in the land, but he's not to consider himself better than his people or above the law. And that's the principle King Arthur upheld when he declared, "I am your king, and I must be your judge in this." This is the same principle Yeshua taught to his disciples. Matthew 25 says this, "But Yeshua called them over and said, 'You know that the rulers of the nations lord it over them, and their great ones play the tyrant over them. It shall not be this way among you, but whoever wants to be great among you shall be your servant. And whoever wants to be first among you shall be your slave, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many.'" Now here's some more irony. Messiah, son of David, is to be King of kings and Lord of lords. Yet Yeshua is saying his disciples should be like him, serving one another, even to the point of laying down their lives for each other. Now how can this be? Well, Paul gives us an explanation in Philippians 2, beginning verse 5. "Have this attitude in yourselves, which also was in Messiah Yeshua, who, though existing in the form of God, did not consider being equal to God a thing to be grasped, but he emptied himself, taking on the form of a slave, becoming the likeness of men, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself, becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. For this reason, God highly exalted him and gave him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Yeshua every knee should bow, both in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue profess that Yeshua the Messiah is Lord, to the glory of God the Father." Now, do you get that? To gain the honor of holding all power in the consolidated offices of prophet, priest, and king, our humble Savior had to subject himself to the lowest status of all, servant to all mankind, bearing the just and righteous punishment for our crimes, and doing so without screaming for justice for himself. Because he has suffered the worst miscarriage of justice that anyone could possibly suffer, he knows how to wield the power of God's government with the compassion and mercy that must temper the righteous judgment our Creator requires. That's what we learn in Isaiah's prophecy of the righteous judge of the suffering servant in Isaiah 53. And that's what he wants us to live out as we demonstrate our love for him by keeping his commandments. Yeshua once asked his disciples the question, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith in the earth? The answer to that comes not in words, but in our testimony of our lives. So what answer will you give him?